Picture this. You're flying a plane with everyone you love towards an amazing vacation in the Bahamas. You filed your flight plan to the fastest, most direct route to get there. And then when you're in the air, a report comes in that there's turbulence ahead, and you're the pilot. What do you do? Because how you answer that question reveals everything about how you approach your week when life throws you a curveball. Hey, friends, today we're going to be talking about the difference between planning for perfection versus planning for reality. Now, before I dive in, I want to share what Susan said when she learned how to implement what I am sharing with you today, because it's this important, all right? Susan said, and I quote, "If someone had only taught me this years ago, I could have saved decades of frustration and feeling like a failure." All right, guys, what I'm sharing today is that important. So I really want you to listen up. So let's kind of go back to our pilot analogy here. So let's pretend you're a pilot. All right, you've got all your friends and family on a plane. You're taking them off to some amazing vacation in the Bahamas. You've got, as pilots always do, they file a plan of how they're going to get from point A to point B. And suddenly you're midair and there's a report of like a thunderstorm or turbulence ahead and all of that. And so, what does a pilot do? Do they completely panic and go, well, forget it, and just turn around and go back home and go, that's it, we're not going on vacation? No. They adjust, right? They adjust the plan. They adjust how they're going to get there. They reroute, right? And eventually they get to the Bahamas. Maybe it's a little bit later. Maybe they got there taking a different route than they had planned initially. But would you wanna get on a plane with a pilot that didn't have the initial plan of how they're getting there? Of course not, right? Because how do you know, like, how do you even know you're gonna be getting where you wanna go? And I love using that analogy for why planning is so important. It's not about perfect execution of the plan. It's about having a much easier way to replan and adjust when things aren't going the way you had hoped when you laid out your initial plan. So let's talk about this in non-analogy ways. Like, what does this look like? How does this show up in your life if you're not a pilot flying a plane? Because I am not either. So think about maybe you are in a work environment where you have that boss that changes their mind constantly and you never feel like you're able to plan for anything at work. So you're like, well, it's going to change, 15 times. Maybe you've got young kids at home with really unpredictable needs. Maybe you're caring for parents on the other end, also with very unpredictable needs. Maybe you yourself have some health issues that have a lot of unpredictability there. Maybe you have an on call job. Maybe you support a lot of clients that do a lot of last minute stuff. This can show up so many different ways in our lives, right? The fact that things are going to be coming at us every day that we could not plan for. And now we need to have to figure out, how do we accommodate this? And so here's what unfortunately happens. And this is what I see happening to women all over the place. They keep trying to create plans for perfection. They're planning for this perfect week of, okay, this is how I'm going to navigate from Monday through Sunday. I'm going to be doing this at this time. I'm going to be doing this at this time. But then life keeps happening to them. And so they just eventually say, planning is pointless. It is a waste of my time because I'm never able to execute on the plan that I create. That's usually what ends up happening. For others, they don't even try and plan because they just take a look at their life and say, the only way I'm going to make this work is that I have got to stay 100% flexible. Or they have a job or a business that is a very creative one. And so I see a lot of creatives talk about, oh, no, 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 I can't plan. I need to stay flexible so that I can, jump in when the mood hits me. Either one of those, where you just give up on planning or you tell yourself you're a person that just needs to stay flexible, 99.9% of the time, what happens is every single day, you end the day feeling behind, even though you were really busy doing a lot of things and you're really, really tired. Here's the actual problem. Here's what's really going on. What's happening if you've abandoned planning, the reason why you are so exhausted is because you are executing every day with no final destination. Back to the pilot thing. Would you want to get on a plane where someone's like, hey, everyone's just get on a plane and we'll just figure out where we're going when we're there and we'll just figure out how we're going to get there? Probably not, because without the final destination, without knowing where you ultimately want to go, there's really kind of no point, and you're just going to kind of be wandering aimlessly. And this is the same with planning. It's this underlying same principle. If you don't take the time to plan, okay, over the course of this next week, here's what my finish line looks like. Here are the key things that need to get done. Here's how I think I am going to get from Monday to Sunday. I'm going to create a plan, but I'm going to create a plan that's going to allow me to absorb if, that turbulence hits, right? Because without a final destination in mind, that day-to-day living is completely overwhelming and exhausting. Now, the good news is it's not that you don't know how to plan, right? Unfortunately, what's happened is almost all planning advice and productivity systems that have been out there in the world for decades now were never built or designed for the life that you are living. Here's what I mean by that. Most planning systems teach a style of planning that really only works when you are in a perfect week. But here's the reality. We are not living in a perfect world. So most systems are teaching planning for perfect weeks, but we're living in an imperfect world. And most planning systems assume that very, very few unexpected things are going to happen. And so these very rigid, kind of more masculine approaches to planning systems often were designed by people who have lives that don't look like ours, the ones listening here on the Work-Life Harmony podcast. And to really kind of highlight this, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Nate Bargatze. He is our family favorite of comedians. And he even has a comedy bit where he's talking about the fact that he gets a call from his daughter's school one day. And over the course of kind of the comedy bit, it kind of uncovers that he doesn't know his daughter's teacher's name. He kind of jokingly is like, okay, okay, fine, I'll come get her. What's the name of the school again? And at the end of this bit, I mean, he's just teasing himself. He basically says, so let me get this straight. You had the mom's number and you had the dad's number, and you chose to call me first? And then says, the only time I'm calling the dad first is if there's two dads. And if you are a primary caregiver, I know that message hits home for you, right? And this is what I mean by planning systems. The ones that have been around for a very long time were built and developed by people, a lot of times men, that are not living the reality of women's lives. And so this is why women just give up on planning, because we are the ones that are, my phone is ringing before my husband's if there's something going on at school. So here is where we need to start. First is reframing really mentally what planning is, the purpose of planning. Because usually when people hear, okay, I'm going to create plans, we think about planning as controlling and dictating what every minute of the day, the week, the month is going to look like. All right. And planning is not about that. What it's about is you being prepared, you as the planner, planning your life and your time, you being prepared to lead and navigate your life through whatever comes up. It's about having a destination, right? A destination of, okay, by the end of the week, these are the critical things that I am deciding are the most important for my time, so that when life is happening to me, I am able to replan and adjust with that final destination still in mind, right? It's about the destination, not exactly implementing the plan the exact way that you laid it out. Just as oftentimes on longer flights, right? They need to adjust the plane, but you're still getting to that final destination. And when you have that plan in place, when that turbulence hits, you're going to be able to adjust. You're going to be able to update your plan. You're going to be able to maybe head in a different direction to get there. You're still going to land at your final destination, right? Because the beauty of planning is allowing you to prepare for when the plan needs to change. Because now you're not just blindly trying to figure out what to do, you have the data and the information of what it is that needs to adjust. I like to think of it kind of like playing a game of Tetris, right? You guys remember that game where all the shapes would fall down and you're trying to move the shapes together in the most efficient way? That's kind of what I feel like my life is a lot. I know the ultimate goal, right? I want to clear off the rows in the game, but I'm moving those pieces around as turbulence hit. And most planning systems, especially if they've been around for a long time, all right, are really good at teaching you how to create an initial plan, but they never teach you how to adjust. They don't talk about what to do when turbulence hits because they're usually teaching planning to a community of people that are not having to accommodate and deal with the level of turbulence that you are. The real secret here is understanding that we just need to plan differently. It's not that we abandon planning or we plan less. We just need to plan differently. And the way that we do that is by planning for turbulence instead of pretending next week's going to be different. Okay, next week won't be as crazy as this week. Okay, if I just get through this month, next month's going to be better. No, it's not. If your life is showing you week after week, month after month, there is still turbulence coming. Instead, we need to create a plan that sees it and acknowledges it and then allows us to have the flexibility to accommodate that. And this is what I always call as planning for uncertainty. Okay. Another great way to think about this is maybe you have some kind of an emergency cash fund, right, with your finances. A lot of people will tell you, hey, set aside money every month into a separate account for kind of an emergency fund so that when your air conditioner breaks or your hot water heater breaks or you get the leak in the ceiling or you need to get new tires on the car, things that you don't budget for, when one of those emergencies hits, you're not going in debt financially, right? You have the money set aside in this emergency fund. That's the exact same principle that we need to apply to our regular planning. This concept of planning for uncertainty is the exact same thing as creating an emergency fund with your time. Now, the number one question I always get is, okay, Megan, well then how much time do I do, right? How much uncertainty do I plan for? Just as someone might ask their financial advisor, how much money should I set aside every month into my emergency fund? Well, I can't tell you that, all right? But what I can do is teach you how to determine what your uncertainty budget is because everyone's is going to be different and different seasons of life are going to introduce different emergency funds. So last year, my planning for uncertainty meant that I had 4 protected hours every week, Monday through Friday, and 2 on the weekends. Well, that worked well for me for a while. Now, in this stage of life, my reality, my turbulence levels have changed. And now I'm building in closer to 5.5 hours during the week and 3 on the weekends for personal stuff, because that's what my life is showing is my reality right now. So I'm not going to try and plan for perfection. I'm going to plan for my reality. It's important to understand when you are planning for your reality, when you are creating your emergency fund with your time, this is not the same thing as when someone goes, quote, leave white space on your calendar. All right. White space is things that other people are going to start grabbing. White space is going to get wasted on things that were not important to you. All right. This is time that is intentionally created as appointments on your calendar that is used only for your turbulence, for your uncertainty. And this is something that is so essential. This is something that I teach very, very early inside of my signature program, the TOP program. All right, it is built into this weekly planning process. But here's what I want you all to take away when you're listening here today. If you've abandoned planning because you feel like your life is too unpredictable, I want you to really reframe the purpose of planning, right? And understand the purpose of it is, what is your destination? Where do you want to go? And then you build a plan that heads you in that direction, but that has the flexibility to absorb your turbulence. Because if you've just abandoned planning, what's ultimately happening is you're abandoning taking control of what your final destination is. And when we abandon that, we open the door for everyone and everything to come in and take over, which is what happens, right? And then we start to feel like we've lost control over our life, over our time. We start to feel disconnected with ourselves. I know this because I was there. I was there for a while when I had a calendar that was completely full and I had no control over it because I had essentially abandoned and had not been planning the right way, which just opened the door for everyone else to take over instead. Now, you may be thinking, my life is more unpredictable than other people's. And if that's you, you need this even more. The more unpredictable, the more you need to put these plans and you need to implement this concept of creating your emergency fund or planning for uncertainty. All right, guys, and different seasons are going to bring up different needs. This same style of planning works for every stage of life. Maybe you're a mom with really small littles that has its own unpredictability. Maybe you're caring for your parents, which has its own layer of predictability. Maybe you're launching a business. Maybe you have a very intense corporate role with a lot of unpredictability, right? Maybe you're managing some of your own health issues. Your uncertainty budget, your emergency fund is going to change throughout your life with different seasons of life. If you've been thinking, God, I just should be able to handle this. Like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just get on top of it? It's not you. It's just that no one's shown you a different way of doing it. So now you get to change the story and say, guess what? I am taking strategic ownership of my own time and my calendar, and I'm going to learn how to create plans that support reality instead of a plan for perfection that does not exist in my life. Creating this emergency fund is you leading with awareness, it's you planning for flexibility, and it's you layering in the right amount of grace into your own schedule. All right, because the ultimate goal here is not to eliminate the turbulence from happening. That's never going to happen. So if you feel like if you just plan well enough, these things won't happen, it's not going to. What it's about is planning for and making space for surprises without the chaos, all right, which allows us to stop ending our weeks feeling behind and to start ending our weeks instead feeling capable and in control. Now, if you want to learn more about the full TOP program, by all means, please feel free to go check it out over at thetopprogram.com. But I really encourage you to start shifting the mental reason why you're doing your planning. It's so that you have a destination in mind. Because when you own the destination, it allows you to do the replan and absorb the turbulence so much better. All right, friends, happy planning.